We'll be right back with Sean Khalifa, undergrad at UCI in the Underground Scholars Program. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. My next guest in this segment is Sean Khalifa. He is an underground scholar at UC Irvine, and he is going to graduate this very quarter. He is here to bring his voting story. I'll just put out the questions, and you can assemble them that makes you happiest, Sean. I want to know, when you first registered to vote, the circumstances around that, and why you're voting today. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for the warm introduction. I first registered to vote as a result of Proposition 17 in California, which restored voting rights to those of us who are on parole. I was on parole in the year 2020. This proposition passed in November. The following year, I registered to vote for the first time in 2021, and that came after a 16-year incarceration and while I was serving a 3-year parole.
And you were not eligible to vote before you were serving time because you were a teenager at the time.
Correct. I was incarcerated at the age of 15.
At 15, and that's key. And I just want to mention briefly for listeners, if you want to hear, Sean has been on this program before. He is in my Ask a Leader archive on January 30th. So those were the circumstances. It was the proposition, and you knew all you needed to know about that. I mean, you did your work, you're watching what was going on in Florida with re-enfranchising felons.
Correct.
Okay. So other circumstances, and why are you voting today in this cycle?
Amazing. So if we talk about other circumstances besides today, it's just historically we've been disenfranchised, and when we return to the community as returning citizens who are formerly incarcerated, we're not enfranchised. We're not a part of this democracy, this idea of democracy. We were placed in a certain category where we were deemed, hey, you could come back out and join us, but we don't want you to participate in what we got going on, which is electing the policymakers and the holders of these positions that will influence your communities, what happens in your communities, what happens to your children. So what happens is because we don't have that connection, it's easier to gravitate towards unstructured groups that some are structured, but not aligning with this democracy that we have here. So that's another reason why I registered to vote. That's circumstances what led me to register for the first time, was to actively participate in the United States. Because throughout my entire life, I never got to actively participate. It always felt like I was unwelcome, or I was in someone else's idea of a nation. So that's some of the factors. Why I'm voting today? A lot of it comes from you, Claudia, because you pushed me during our interview on some questions, maybe off air, as to why I should actively vote, because when you don't say anything, that's an action. So if I take no action, then it is co-signing what you don't want, even if you don't want the alternative, which I don't support any of the leading candidates. So Joe Biden and Donald Trump are not my leading candidates that I would want to see in office. I believe it's time for someone who's never been there. We need a fresh set of ideas. We don't have Bernie Sanders, but the closest I had to lean on was Marianne Williamson, because I looked at her work as an author, myself as an author, and I've published over 10 books. She has 15 to her name, and she's done a lot of activism to where she's actively went out in the community and worked to influence policyholders to incorporate reparations into the community for those communities that were harmed. While she's running for president, part of her platform is to establish a peace division within our government, which is needed because you can look at different ways to influence the world. Do you want to influence it through a fear-based, imperialist style? I have the biggest military, you follow my economic demands, or else we'll sabotage your country? Or do you want a peace department that can say, we can show you love, because this is how Marianne wants to lead, through love and peace and her ideology. She wants to show this to the world. And I always believe that love is a stronger influencer than fear-based leadership. And I think that's where she would take us. I don't know if we'll be allowed to get there, but I know that she wants to push us in that direction. And that's why she got my vote in the primaries, and also her universal health care, universal education, because I believe that increases equality in our communities, because we want to improve equitable access to higher education and equitable access to medical care in the United States because we currently don't have it. And those who are haves have the access and those who are have-nots don't. I'm not okay with that. And also to continue to have the same leaders in place versus bringing in someone who's never held a political position. I know that she's a little more mature. She's 71 years old, that's not I did want to go with a younger generation and see what those of us who are in our 30s and 40s have to bring to the table for future political leadership in our country. But I'm okay with going with somebody who's more mature because she's never held a political office. I definitely don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And that's kind of where I'm at today, why I voted for who I voted for.
And to capture all of the questions I'm asking you in the Civic Ask a Voter program exercise is, I've had Karamit Ryder on. She is a legal scholar, also an appointment in the School of Social Ecology, and she's talked about the numbers are very clear, and I think you and I talked about this in preparation for your previous appearances. Re-enfranchising felons, there's a certain correlation with that involvement and bringing recidivism down to a pretty low percentage.
Correct. We were looking at just education. So, for instance, providing equitable education to everybody, including those of us who come home from the carceral setting. When an individual goes on to attain an associate's degree, their recidivism rate drops to around 50%. Outside of that degree, it's more around 70%. But then once they go on to a bachelor's degree, it drops even further. And when we get to a master's degree, we have a significant drop to zero currently based on our latest studies. So if you have the numbers to back up the success, each person who does not recidivize means no victim of a crime has occurred. So we saved somebody from becoming a victim of a crime by providing equitable access to higher education. Because the old saying is, if you know better, you do better. And how can somebody know better if they don't have access to gaining that knowledge on how to fit into our society? And again, without the right to vote, that's another component that may keep you from even participating in our education system because you have one less connection. And where you feel like you don't belong, you don't typically want to go or navigate towards. So if you feel like you're not completely involved in a process, you'll navigate away from that or step back because that's not your space. Sadly, that happens in our K through 12, and that's how you get the school to prison pipeline. And that's what I was speaking to, and I hope that answered some of that question.
Well, thank you so much. Any
No
final comment?
Yeah, I would encourage you to get out there and vote. Even if you don't appreciate the candidates that are running, you're either voting for his opposition or you're voting for the other one. So my best advice would be vote for the lesser of two evils, get involved, and then hopefully in the future, we'll get the candidates we want to see in place if that's not ourselves.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time today. We're pre-recording this the day before Super Tuesday. Thank you, Sean Khalifa, for being on Ask a Voter.
Thank you for respecting my voice. Appreciate you, Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you. My guest was Sean Khalifa. He's graduating in the Underground Scholars Program at UCI with a major in sociology, completing his degree this winter quarter. We'll be right back with the next voter.